good evening and good morning. This is Ian Berry and welcome to another Wise Leaders Conversation. My special guest today is Peter Merrett, and as I was telling the folks online, Peter and I started out as friends. He became my client, then my colleague, but through it all, Peter, we have remained friends. And I think it's fair to say that in the corporate world, Peter was a star in the customer service space, working for Jones Lang LaSalle. But in the last, I think it's 5 years, Peter, you'll tell us when we pop the first question to you, but you've been out as a professional speaker of recent times. And
for three years, yeah.
3 years, and are delighting the world with your presentations from the House of Wonderful. So, Peter, I thought lovely that you can join us, and it's we've had a number of great conversations over the 10 years we've known one another. But I thought I'd kick off because there's something that's puzzled me that I haven't quite, and I've never got around to asking you. But I thought it was a great place to maybe start our conversation. That is, there's a picture of you on your website with an immaculate suit on, but you're on a ride-on mower, and you're in the outback too, it looks like.
Yes.
So, I mean, what's that about? Let's start there.
Gosh, crikey. Well spotted, Ian. I think one of the greatest things that I've learned in the last few years since I finished at corporate was, more than anything now, I've got the opportunity to really be my truest, fullest self. And when I was filming my new film, Bringing Wonderful to Life, a great film team, and they telephoned me and just said, is there any chance tomorrow you can jump in the car and drive to Narrabri? We've got a surprise for you. And I said, yeah, sure, I'd be happy to. Where's Narrabri? Not knowing, looking on the map, it was about an inch, the distance. I didn't know it was an 11-hour drive. But when I got to Narrabri, Pete Longworth, who did the amazing filming for me, he stood at his dad's garage and proudly opened the double doors. And he said, there it is. This is for you. And it was his dad's red ride-on lawnmower. He said, tomorrow we're going to take it out into the remotest parts of the outback. Pop your best suit on. And it kind of, it was just a ridiculously exciting moment. But it's when I realized, wow, I get to be me completely. This isn't a photo of me just standing against a white wall, as traditionally we would do, or, with a plain background. And we just played in the outback with me driving up and down on the lawnmower. And it's since become my kind of little signature thing, where people actually now call me and say, is this you, the person on the lawnmower? So it's become like a running joke. But I think, if anything, the biggest part of it was I finally got to play with the truest character of me.
Which is kind of interesting in itself. I mean, one of the things that we try to do here in the work in these conversations and the other work that I do with folk is we're trying to help people to do that in wherever they might be. But how interesting that a lot of folk still in the corporate world don't feel like they can be their true selves. I know that's a fact.
Yeah.
But I still find it fascinating, because if they were able to bring them true selves, how much more their performance would be.
Completely. And, we all say to each other, be yourself and let your personality shine. But we need to really, the more we can encourage people to be their full self and be their best self and nothing other than themselves, this is when real magic happens, when people can bring their full personality to a task or bring their full personality to a role and not be afraid to do so. If you look at great teams in all businesses, there's some amazing people, but quite often you can see that they're a little bit suffocated because they're kind of wrapped up in the rules and the processes and procedures of a business. And the more we can let people shine, the more amazing things that they will do.
It's just incredible. I know Simone, who's making her way home, but she struggled with this a little bit in her corporate life. In fact, she's just in the throes of leaving the corporate life to do what you've done and what I did as well. But for me, it's 30 years ago. But interestingly, in other folks in the room, we might look at this idea: is why is it difficult for people to bring their true selves to their work when they're working for corporations? Why is that the case? Any offerings?
And I suppose just to interject with that, Ian, for everybody, just to say how pleased I am to be here with you. And the more we can create a really open, bouncy conversation here, let's have a great dialogue.
Indeed, and I encourage, because as I said at the start, it is a conversation, and so anyone feel free to just join in. For sound purposes, keep yourself muted when you're not speaking, but other than that, join in whenever you feel like you'd like to contribute, ask a question, make a comment, whatever.
This is something that I've really pondered over the last 10 years, particularly of my working life. And it's almost like a mask people put on when they go into work, and there's a work mask. But what I've found is that the more you pull that mask away, the more fulfilled, the more people get to know you, and actually the better not only your performance is, but also the performance of the team around you. And it's just a really fascinating interplay around this mask as such versus playing out who you are. And examples from my own end is that I've been known to dance in an office regularly. And people just look at that and go, who are you? What type of alien are you? But then the feedback that I get is that you're a fantastic leader because you really are truly your authentic self. And it's really about bringing that authenticity of yourself, because putting a mask on every day can actually be quite exhausting. By the end of the week, who are you at the end of the week? Are you your so-called work self, or who is your real self at the end of the week?
Wonderful insight, Simone. I think it's also perhaps, and I'm going to come to you, Peter, as to why you chose wonder and wonderful, because it's been part of who you are your whole life. I know that from our friendship, but why did you choose it as your way of being more authentic and being more you in the world?
I think there's a number of things that came to the surface for me as I was getting closer to surrendering and finishing at corporate life, is that I realized as I was getting older, my sense of wonder from my sort of 5 or 6 year old self was getting stronger. And I hadn't realized it was getting stronger up until, me turning 50 recently. I feel that my sense of wonder currently is as important and as strong as when I was a toddler. So it's, reflecting on my earlier career, I just feel incredibly fortunate that I got to work with and work for some just the most incredible, outstanding leaders who encouraged me to be myself and to play with that kind of sense of wonder. Look at some of the hotels that I was involved in the management of, where we were achieving just ridiculously brilliant customer service and teamwork because we were all allowed to play with our sense of wonder. So it's something.
Tower 42, if I recall, in London was one of you were the managing director there, if I recall.
Yeah, Tower 42, so high-rise office building in the City of London, was the tallest building in London. And I'll never forget my interview for Tower 42. I came from hotels into Tower 42, and it was a very formal interview. I was on one side of the boardroom table. There were 7 of the owners along the other side. And they said, we've got no idea what you've just done in hotels. We're property owners and investors. No idea what it is, all of that fluffy hospitality stuff. But could we give you our full permission to turn our building, make our building fun, make our building into something that's kind of never been seen before? We'll support you all the way. We won't interfere with what you're doing. But right there from that beginning, from that moment, it was there, that beautiful moment when they shared their permission to say, you know, we will support you all the way. And we just, as I gathered all of the team together, because I did ask one of my first questions, I remember I said, oh, how many people are in the team? And they kind of looked puzzled at each other. They said, oh, about 7. And I nearly fell off my chair. I thought, crikey, you know, that's amazing. There's 3,000 people work in this building and there's a team of 7. And they went, oh, you mean the contractors and the service providers? We haven't got a clue. You know, as I started to gather everybody together, there were groups of people, the cleaners, the housekeepers, the electricians, the chefs, all the reception team, the security guards, gathered everybody together, and I found nearly 200 people who were all working separately and apart from each other, totally isolated. And very quickly, I shared the same permission that the owners did with me. And we just all sat together and said, how far shall we take this? And everybody agreed, well, let's make this the best office building in the world, which we were awarded in 2008 by BOMA International in America. And the judges' comments were hilarious because they said, we've never seen anything like it before. One of the judges asked if I had any vacancies, if I could send them an application form. But the biggest thing is that we made it fun. So that's where this sense of wonder, you know, in the beginning, people I remember said to me, oh, this is just the fluff. We haven't got time for the fluff, all this fluffy stuff. And, you know, it was a great moment where we're actually able to prove people wrong and prove the value of what people considered to be fluff. You know, we achieved the highest rents in the City of London. We had a waiting list for space and people kept renewing their leases. No one wanted to leave because we turned it into an office building, the same as a hotel, but with no bedrooms. So this was 2002, 2003 when we started.
I think it's fascinating, and I'm curious as to what this story, this wonderful story of Peter's so far, brings up for other folks in the room. So I'm observing a lot of curiosity on people's faces, Peter. So let's open up the conversation. And what's it bringing up for you folks, other folks?
I find it very interesting because I think and I'm probably a bit different to the rest of you in that I don't work. I work for government and I work in a human services field, so not in corporate. So it's a little bit different. And I think there's so many opportunities for that, as you said, Peter, that sense of wonder and to bring in the fluff, but it doesn't tend to happen because being government, we get bogged down in the process and all too often. And we tend to, I think, forget that, you know, at the end of the day, we're a human services field, that, you know, we're there for the people that we work with. And yeah, I think that loss of that sense of fun is something that is very sadly missing in government across the board.
It's an interesting observation. Thank you, Melissa, for that. Is one of the things that I see most frequently is because people will dismiss it because simply we haven't got time. You know, we're all really busy, we're stretched, people are time poor. So things like that often get pushed to the side as we just haven't got the ability all the time to think about it. But when we actually realize the simplicity of it, because one of the popular things I often used to hear and still hear now is, is leaders and people saying, you know, we've got to get our mindset right. We've got to, you know, make think about how our mind is telling us with these kind of things, so our mindset. And what I'd always challenge with that is, but what about our heart set? So, you know, setting our heart to speak to our minds, but just changing our thinking around the other way.
I love the story. Like Ian said, it's really starts something and touches. And I think because I always was looking for different way, different thinking and out of the box thinking, how you create and work with companies and not the normal standard mainstream way. So that's when every time I hear a story like this, I love it. And I think that's what the past, I don't know, 10, 20 years, I was just trying always to find these kind of stories because I love it. And now I'm finally at the point where I try to turn all that into trying to inspire people to change, in the way they work in companies and create their work life. And for me, it's, I say, the interesting part you said, it's like about time, because that I think is a lot of times is the problem that they, oh, I don't have time. But that's what I try with my work now, with paying attention, like paying attention to your people and their authentic themselves, and paying attention takes time actually. But in the end, and that's what bothers me in this world, is that we always think so short term instead of long term. And I think what you're creating also is, if you manage to finally think long term, you can create something like that. But people are so frantic and say, oh no, if we can't realize this in 3 months, then it doesn't help us. No, it will help you in the long run. And I think that's, as more people we can try to change companies like that, it would be great.
And I think it's fair to say, Peter, that you found ways, because of this, people saying not have time, you found ways to lift people's spirit in the moment in your corporate life. And I imagine lifting people's spirit in the moment is still a part of what you're doing now, if I'm not incorrect. Yeah,
thank you. And thanks to Claudia for, you know, your thoughts there as well. Excuse me. And on reflection with Tower 42 as an example, is that we involved everybody with everything. So we sought everybody's opinion on everything. So our daytime cleaners, more of the junior members of the team, we would actually say to people, what do you think? Or how does this sound? Or is there a better way of doing this? You know, one of the signature things that we created at Tower 42 was, each year we hosted a children's party for all of the customers of the building. Or that was another thing we did with customers. We dropped the word tenant completely. So we introduced a kind of a guest way of thinking. But one of the things, our signature event each year, people would bring their children in for a party. About 600 children would descend on Tower 42, and it would just turn into pandemonium. But one of the years, after 4 years of running this, we all sat in our team gathering. We dropped the word meetings as well. We didn't have any meetings, only gatherings. But one of the things that we did, we sat back and said, right, next Thursday, we've got the children's Christmas party. Is there something that we can do the moment that Santa arrives to deliver all of the presents to the children? Is there something that we could do to enhance the experience? So to make the moment more memorable. And I very quickly said to the team as well, we haven't got any budget for this at all, but is there something we can do to be creative for Santa's arrival? And I'll never forget Charles Pabby, called Charlie, one of the most humble people that I've ever worked with, was one of our daytime cleaners from Ghana. And he sat back and said, what about from the roof? So Tower 42 was 600 feet tall, 600 feet above the pavement. And we said, what do you mean? And he said, well, we've got the window where the window cleaners go in, up and down. And so we went up on the roof and he showed us. He said, well, if we put Santa Claus in the window cleaning cradle, and we did. we just said, brilliant idea, let's give it a go. You know, quite easy, we could have just brushed it off and said that's ridiculous. Because people were very quick to say, you know, what about health and safety, the risk assessment, all of the procedural stuff. But we said, let's give it a go. So on level 32, we hosted the children's party in an area of vacant space. And halfway through, all of the children started screaming because outside of the window, Father Christmas was there waving at all of the children. You know, all of the floors, as Father Christmas was going down, he was waving at all of the levels until he got to the floor. And you know, very quickly, the local London TV stations caught wind of it, the national papers, and it became our kind of real signature thing, which we fully always credited and honored Charlie with. But the beauty of it is that it cost nothing to do it. And you know, if I had dismissed it and said it was silly, it wouldn't have happened. If I hadn't asked the question to everybody, what do you think? So it's really, you know, just thinking to your point there, Claudia, the more we can say to people and involve people and let them share their ideas, no matter how junior people are, because this is where the little gems of wisdom come from. And not being frightened or scared to ask people's opinion, but the more we can do it, the more inclusive it makes the whole working environment. The workplace just becomes something that people can't wait to go to work because you've got this camaraderie that's just extraordinary. But we have to stay true to it and, you know, work at it every single day.
It's also, Claudia, if I may say, given that paying attention is Claudia's area of expertise, that we're coming up with some great ways here that we actually do pay attention, Claudia.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, Claudia also runs, I think it's fair to say, a world-leading event, Claudia, for photographers.
It's a photo academy. So it's not that big. It's 20, 30 people, but it's the core idea also is to really take care of all the people. So paying attention for me means caring. And why people like it so much in this community is growing because they feel different. They're not just feel they go to some photo workshop. It's a 4-day event, which takes this everyday full program from morning to evening. And everybody feels being really good taken care of. And if it's from all the instructors and or all the people, the helpers. So it is also this great kind of community all on one level. Not the top photographers, professionals who are the instructors, they're not here. And the rest is, oh yeah, they're all on one level and can ask them all day long and are taken care of. So kind of that concept I'm working on with paying attention, I actually had in this photo academy. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's, given your German background, Claudia, Germany would have to be the most efficient nation on the earth. But when you add that to a sense of wonder and a sense of fun and really paying attention, really taking care of people, I think we do, Peter, we're able to create a sense of wonder for everyone. I bet Charlie still remembers all of that.
100% completely. And it's still something they do every year now. It makes people feel special when they're heard and when they're involved and when they feel appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
And I sidetracked your question previously, and I'll jump in here actually with that kind of thought of gratitude and lifting our spirits at the moment. You know, on reflection, we all know this, you know, the last year or so has really knocked us and bruised our hearts a little bit. And I think the more that we can put our arms around people and not actually feel afraid or think it's silly to do so, can really lead us into some fresh way of being. And it's a quote that I was given very early in my hotel years has stayed with me for a number of years, and I'd love to share it here to give you an idea. Is from the fabulous Jim Rohn. And he said, one of the greatest gifts you can give someone is the gift of attention. And I'm reflecting on a number of months ago now when we came out of lockdown here in Sydney. Finally, we had the day when we were going to take the children back to school, and there'd be, you know, our patience was tested to the full limit, as I know it was with everybody. We've got two little boys, Jake is 10 and Zach is 12. And that thought of getting them back to school was just very, very exciting indeed. And normally just getting them out of the house is one of the greatest challenges of my life currently. Just getting them ready with their shoes on, with their teeth brushed to leave the door and actually get them out of the door is, you know, an alleluia moment in itself. But when we took the kids back to school and I drove them to school, something happened that changed the whole feeling of the school environment. And it was something that the school principal did. And not just what he did, but what he was saying and where he was actually based. When we pulled up at school, there's a car line, so all of the parents can drive along and drop their kids at the school gates. And usually they just walk up the stairs and into the school gates, but it's where he was standing and what he was doing that made the difference. See, he was standing outside of the school gates on the other side of the road, and as each car pulled up to drop the kids out, he did a friendly little wave and said good morning to all of the children. And he did it over and over and over again as all of the cars went through. And I just thought, wow, it was just brilliant. It sent like this positive ripple across the whole school. All of the teachers were copying him, and you could just feel the vibe across the playground. And interestingly, I thought, wow, you know, the school principal is probably one of the busiest people in the school as the top leader. Usually you'd think the school principal in the morning would be hidden in the office, doing his emails, doing all of his paperwork and all of the administration side of his role. But it was his heart that took him there. And when we went the next day, I thought it would have gone back to normal, but he was there again. And for the last 4 months, he's made it his daily habit. Even last week, those of you saw the news around New South Wales and Sydney with all of the rain and the flooding. When I was taking the boys to school last week, he's still there with his umbrella continuing. So he's kept it as his habit and his consistency.
I obviously thought this was such a wonderful story that I included it in the book.
There you go.
That's why I read it. I was wondering. I thought I know the story.
Yeah.
I read it on LinkedIn first of all, and I sent Peter a note saying I'd love to include this in Heart Leadership, which of course Peter gave me permission to do so. And so seeing, apart from you, Jeff, I think everyone in the room has the book, so we'll find a way to get a copy to you. But interestingly, it's just one of those stories. I think you said earlier, Peter, we have a lot of conversation about mindset, but what you're indicating, and I'm 100% with you, we need more conversation about heart set. And
well, the thing is with the school principal, Mr. Fagerstrom, our school principal, is that, you know, relating this to our own roles, our own businesses that we're in right now, is not just seeing these kind of things, but noticing. Now, what I mean by that is, I saw what he did, but I really noticed. And I could have done nothing and just thought to myself, oh, that was nice, and thought nothing else of it. But I decided I had to do something, and I kind of pondered and wondered what I could do. And I just poured my heart into writing that little article, published it on LinkedIn, not knowing what would happen. And very quickly, after about the first week, I had nearly 3,000 views. But it was the comments that were coming in from around the world with people saying, you know, really senior leaders saying to me, thank you for what we'd forgotten. Thank you for what we've lost sight of. So people were thanking me for the reminder. And I waited and waited until there was, I don't know, 50 comments or something on there. And I thought, right, what can I do? Rather than emailing the link to Mr. Fagerstrom, I printed out the article, put it in a little folder, and took it when I went to collect the boys from school. And I waited till all of the school children had come off the playground and gone, and he was right at the very end. And I kind of, on reflection, almost felt quite nervous, definitely anxious, when I went to give him the article, and I handed it to him, and I just said, this is something for you. And he looked down at the paper in front of him, and he was almost confused by, what's this for? And I just said, on behalf of the whole community, we've really noticed what you've done, and we're very grateful for what you've done. And this was just my way of saying thank you. Now, the point of the story here is, you know, had I have just seen it but didn't notice, or had I not taken the time to actually make sure he realized how much it was appreciated, the moment would never have happened. And we can lose these kind of moments because we are so busy. It's very easy to forget and think, you know, that amazing thing that such and such did, but never actually say something. But it's not just saying it, it's how we say it. I mean, this is what makes us great leaders, great supervisors, great managers, great employees, great human beings. Taking that time to actually make sure people know they're appreciated. And it's something we all need more than anything, all of us right now, is not, you know, not brushing it off as, oh, that's, you know, it's silly with all of this, thanks. Or putting our arms around people and actually, you know, showing them the way, but making sure people know that they're appreciated. And it's the thing that happened with Mr. Fagerstrom is a trigger that I have in my mind every day from my early days in hotels. And right at the beginning of my career, we were encouraged with we were given the number 8. And number 8 has kind of almost become tattooed on my forehead, or definitely tattooed in my brain. See, number 8 is the number of letters in the 2 of the most profound words in the English language, which is thank you. Also, 8 is the letters in the word grateful and thankful. And the reason we were given number 8 is it's just really easy to remember. So it's, you know, all of these things that happen. Is there something that's already happened in your day already today that you've missed? Is there an opportunity you've had already to say thank you to somebody has been missed? And it's something, as I say, we all need probably more than anything currently, but this is what builds great workplaces. It builds great cultures, great customer service environments, and a great place to go to work.
And I think when we worked together, Peter, and Paul was also involved in this process, we did a program called Catching People Doing Things Right. Because the traditional thing was catching people doing things wrong. And that's still the modus operandi for a lot of managers around the place. But it was just, I think, Paul, you might like to come in here, but this whole idea that one of the leaders' role is to catch people doing things right. And when I was working in that space with you guys, I'm sure I told my own attitude of gratitude story in those seminars. But one thing I do remember also referencing was that great, wonderful insight from the eminent psychologist, William James, who said that the deepest human desire is a craving to feel appreciated. And he said that over 100 years ago.
Isn't it breathtaking?
So this is not anything new, but so it's not just any old desire, but the deepest desire is a craving to be appreciated. And I think, Paul, you've built your career on doing this, so it's a perfect segue to you, probably, Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. And also having worked on a lot of projects with Peter, I think a lot of your essence, Peter, is just about finding ways to give people something they're not expecting, but in a positive sense. So the old surprise and delight approach, and kudos to you, because you put a lot of imagination and thought and effort and heart into doing that. And one of the things, having gotten to know Peter very well over the years and become good friends, is that you, and you said it in your thing, handing that that document to the principal, you were quite nervous and anxious about that. And I've seen you often nervous and anxious about putting your heart out there, and I think it's because we're in a world where putting your heart out there is a very vulnerable and confronting thing to do, and you do it all the time. And I wondered if you could talk a bit about the anxiety and the nervousness that you experience when you're really putting these heartfelt ways to surprise and delight, because I've seen you in situations where you've been ridiculed for doing that, but then the impact of what you've done, because you've gone and done it anyway, has more than made up for the possible ridicule and anxiety that you felt going into that scenario.
And I think, Peter, before you answer, I think it's worth noting that this is something we talk about in Wise Leaders community often, because not everyone's comfortable with heart leadership. Not everyone wants to even use the word.
Yeah.
And
you can hear it in Peter's voice.
You can.
There's an absolute heart coming through in what you're talking about, but there's also, you can almost sense an anxiety in that you're putting yourself out there, and you can almost feel something's trying to say, no, hold yourself back. And I think we all experience that, but I'd love to hear more from Peter about it.
Yes, indeed. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. It's as I kind of opened with my message of, me sat on the lawnmower, is, it's me being my true self. I guess it, goes back to thanks to my parents and all the rest of it for showing me this kind of importance with sharing gratitude. But I guess I didn't realize it was so noticeable, but I do get quite nervous, with Mr. Fagerstrom, when as I handed him the article, it wouldn't have taken much to have tipped me over, and I could have quite easily burst into tears probably. Because I wanted him to know. And that's what I was saying earlier, the difference between seeing and noticing. And I look at big, busy businesses and corporate organizations where it's just not even in our thoughts to do things like that.
So I actually took your article and gave it to the principal at my son's school here.
Really?
Because this is a school, it's an international school in Singapore with 2,500 kids. It's an Australian school. And every day, rain, hail, or shine, the principal and the vice principal are actually doing crossing duty. Because they don't have the Australian school crossing thing doesn't exist in Singapore, but the principal and vice principal have taken it upon themselves to become the crossing people every single day. And they're high-fiving kids and parents on the way into school every morning. And your article exactly reflected the impact that those guys have on the culture at this school. And so I forwarded the article to Andre here and said that it made me think immediately of him.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
God, what an emotional moment this is.
There's another one, right?
Isn't it absolutely fascinating, though, that this is what the world is actually like? The world is not what's on the 7 o'clock news. Like in David's football club that we were talking about in the pre-chat, David's leading a club that's all about inclusion, and where blokes are speaking up and out against domestic violence, and that's in a soccer club.
Yeah. Do you mind if I add something to what you said there, Ian, which is that I think that's what the world is like only when people are given permission to care, because there are a lot of organisations where people have not got permission to care, and therefore they don't care. And all that heart and all that energy and all that positivity is just sapped out of the organisation.
I think that's true, and I think giving people permission is a leadership, is what real leaders do, is they give people permission to be themselves. And when we are being ourselves, because after all, each of us is a one of a kind human being. You know, there hasn't been another one like us. There's no duplicates.
Yeah.
And when we get permission to be that one of a kind human being, that's where the magic is, Peter. And you're just a perfect example of that. And I think, Claudia, I'm so glad that you're online, given paying attention to your field, because I think we've had some wonderful wisdom in these conversations, but it's going to be pretty hard to top seeing and noticing. I think it's just a wonderful takeaway, and I think, David, that you might have some reflections here. That's one of the reasons why the soccer club is working, and why there was so many people in that event recently, is because people, you see and you notice.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like even then, like you feel like, I think what Paul was saying before is spot on about that vulnerability that you create when you're trying to heart concept of leadership. And even on that day, and then since that, you sort of think, I hope it went okay. You know what I mean? Like I think it went okay, but I hope it went okay. I'm not always convinced necessarily. And I think what you're talking about, an opportunity to care and being like leaders, allowing people to be their best. What can often derail that is others around us having concerns around intentions. And I think, I don't know what you think about that, Peter, in terms of how do you continually then not concern yourself with what other people think or say, but then also another question for you is, how do you notice things that you do well and acknowledge yourself, like within yourself, so it's not necessarily a case of it needing to be that you're needing someone else to do that acknowledgement for you, if you know what I mean? So you can do that for yourself, so it gives you the opportunity to be a better place to help others.
These are brilliant questions, David.
Yeah.
Peter, I'm sure you have some enlightening answers.
Yeah, they're definitely. You know, the first one, where with all good intentions, I think there's always a right moment or a right way for specific things, and taking the right judgment with those, because, you know, some signs of public gratitude might not be appropriate for some people. It might be for others. You know, some people like with Mr. Fagerstrom, something like that, I treated very privately with how I delivered it to him personally. I didn't, for example, make an announcement in the school assembly about it, because that would have had a very different kind of effect. But I think the more that we can do it, often the people who are concerned with how it might be portrayed or might come across are often the people who aren't sharing their gratitude because they're too busy or it's not of importance to them. So I think the more we can stand true to what our heart tells us, that, you know, this is the right way, that believing in your own belief with something like this is kind of how I guide myself with. It is a daily habit for me in whatever way that I show it. But I always think more in how I can actually personalize that expression. It could just be a simple phone call, or it might be more appropriate as a little email or whatever it might be, but just as long as I don't miss the moment.
How do you do it for yourself then?
For myself is being very conscious of that, because, you know, the biggest thing I've struggled with personally, after a whole career working in hotels and corporate, surrounded by amazing teams of people that you know, light me up, and it's the reason I go to work, to now being a solo business owner. As you know, there's no one here. I can't say, what do you think? Because there's no one there. So it's really it's been a big transition for me. But it is just being, I guess, myself being mindful that what I've done is good, and almost reminding myself that what I'm doing is right. But I do seek feedback from other people with different things on, whether something I've delivered or a service I provided is what they wanted, what they were expecting. So I'm not shy with asking for feedback as well, or asking someone's opinion on something. But it is, we've got to pat ourselves on the back as well. I haven't got any special techniques, but I'm just very mindful of not being too hard on myself, really, with not doing it.
I was just going to say, there was a wonderful line there that I want to make sure we capture, Peter. I thank you for it. You said, there is always a right moment and a right way.
Yeah, and one of my reflections of recent years, saying corporate often gratitude or thanks was saved up for the annual Christmas party, or for the annual awards night, or for the 12-month performance review that you've got with a member of your staff. We almost save up our gratitude for that moment. So it's making it as frequent. It's a daily habit, not an annual event kind of thing, But on the story of Mr. Fagerstrom, just seeing his reaction to me putting that article into his hands was, made it all worthwhile. He was almost, I could sense he was almost about to say, well, I was just doing my job. It was one of those, what he was saying, it was almost, he was going to say something like that. But he was totally overwhelmed because we noticed. But it doesn't matter how we say it. Interestingly, Zach started at high school in January, and he got one of the last places in the school that he was really wanting to go to. But something happened when he found out that he'd made it into the high school, because something arrived in the letterbox, and it's not very common that we actually get things in the letterbox. And he got an envelope to him with a handwritten, with his name and address handwritten, and he almost looked at it as if, 12-year-old, he was almost like, what's this? But he opened it, and the principal of his new school, so this is a different principal, wrote this card, and I'm not expecting you to even try and read this, other than you can see that the amount of words on here, everything about it. It started with, it was a pleasure to spend time with you and your parents recently. I was so impressed by your maturity, eagerness, and ability, blah, 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 blah. Kind regards at the end, Mr. Hartley. Really looking forward to you joining school. There's 600 children at Zachary's new school, but it's the fact that the headmaster, that must have took a bit of time to do, and then write it in a handwritten envelope and put a stamp on it. So there's lots of ways we can do it, but it's just making it a simple habit rather than it being a chore.
Tom Peters is calling this extreme humanism. Tom's latest book arrived in my letterbox a couple of days ago, and I watched. When I send the recording, I'll send it to you because I think you would all enjoy it. But Tom is interviewed by Seth Godin. It's about a 40-minute conversation, and it's just because Tom's been talking about putting people first for 47 years or something. It's the reason he's one of my heroes. And yet some people still haven't heard it. It's one of the reasons Tom's 78, I'm 67, but I keep going because there's still people who haven't heard the message. Put people first.
Yeah.
And if you do that, heavens above, you might make more money. And you usually do, because no one wants to be in a business where you're not making a profit, but it's still a secret to some people that, you put people first and it all happens. It's still a secret. in government, local government, state government, corporations, it's still a secret apparently. So that's why you and me, and I think all of us in our own way, I got up this morning because there's still more people to share this message that if you put people first, it all works out.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, I look at different organizations who spend such a huge amount of time doing exit interviews, doing recruitment, you know, getting people, trying to find people to join them. But when you actually can really maintain and hold on to the people you've got because they just love coming to work for you, with you. And it's the whole thing with Mr. Fagerstrom, and my message to you here is it comes back to the boomerang. And interestingly, I don't know if you knew this, anybody on the call, or you, Ian, is that the first original boomerang dates back 10,000 BC. So it's a fascinating piece of detail I found recently. But the thing with, you know, Mr. Fagerstrom, with the letter that Zachary got by saying things, it will always cause a boomerang effect. The more we give, it will always, always, always keep coming back, whether it's with delighted customers or the teams or the people you're working with. If we put this as the top priority in whatever environment you are, it's just going to pave the way to everything. But quite often it comes down at the bottom because we're too busy with everything else we're thinking about. So
it's a key part of Aboriginal culture. Funny that you mentioned that, and it probably goes back even longer than that. One of the great books that I've been studying and exploring recently is a book called Truth Telling. It's written by Henry Reynolds, who's an Aboriginal historian, probably the most famous Aboriginal historian in Australia. And the book Truth Telling doesn't use the same words that you're using, Peter, but it's saying the same thing, that you need to see and notice that there is a right moment and a right way. And I'm wondering, other reflections in the room about what can you take away from this, and be braver, be more vulnerable, be wear your heart on your sleeve a bit more often.
Peter, as I listen into you, as you know, I have the privilege of working with you all the time, but I was reminded of the opportunity you and Susie and I had to grab lunch in California at the wonderful grocery store, and we got to experience really some outstanding points of customer service and hospitality that have devolved within 15 seconds into our worst experience ever. Thought maybe you'd want to relate that to the group. I think there's a lot that could be taken from that story.
So this was Whole Foods supermarket, and just getting a takeaway lunch from their counter. But it was the way that I think it was the server who was serving us practically jumped over the counter and was bursting out of her skin with eagerness and enthusiasm. She was just, I think one of my questions, Jeff, it was a couple of years ago now, was asking about the pride that she showed in telling us exactly why we should have it, because it was just irresistible to, it was just brilliant. Did that kind of capture it, Jeff?
Yeah, and so we had a brilliant moment there, and then 15 seconds later at the checkout counter, we had another experience. Do you recall that?
Yeah, when we then went to pay for it, the experience was polar opposite, where it was just rude, brash, and totally disinterested. And these two employees of the same supermarket were geographically about 10 feet apart, in the same uniform, working for the same organization, but the experience was polar opposite. So we went up really high, and then as we walked out with our amazing sandwich or whatever it was, we went rock bottom low. So
Simon Sinek,
fascinating.
Simon Sinek tells a similar story. I think, Simone, we explored this a couple of weeks ago, where I forget the name of the guy, Paul and Simone, I think you were on that call, where we looked at the Simon Sinek video, and he was talking about a guy who works for some organization, and he's wonderful, but he doesn't say anything in another organization because of this thing. Simone, Paul, you might be able to remember
I
more?
think it was two different hotels, and the same guy works in one hotel, and then his second job's in another hotel, and the service that he gives in one hotel is completely different to the service he gives in another. And I think in every situation, really, the customer service is a reflection of the way those staff are treated, the way they're empowered, and the way they feel about the organisation.
And Peter, I know you've got a lot of tips that you can probably hand out. One of the things that I've loved about your work over the years is that you stopped having meetings and you called them gatherings, which I know has been insightful. I wouldn't mind you tapping on that a little more. But I think if my memory is correct, you started out life as a chef, and kitchens are not generally known in hotels as the most friendly place. So there might be some interesting reflections that you could give in how you started out in the hotel industry as a chef, but also, you know, some tips that you've got for, you know, having better, happier workplaces.
Yeah, thank you. I'll tackle the latter one first with the chef. So when I left school, I trained professionally as a chef, and the training put me off being a chef as a career. I realized I wasn't confined to being inside the four walls of a kitchen. But the greatest thing that I learned, and this is a lesson that goes back 30 years almost now, from when I left my chef's training, was my admiration, and through to this day, you know, if anybody needs a masterclass in time management or use of personal time, you know, we would all benefit from looking at a chef's routine. And chefs are masters at allocating and being accountable for every single minute of their working day, you know, to the clock ticking down to the seconds of precision. So quite often I often giggle when I see different articles or the new latest system or app for time management, or, you know, the new fancy to-do list, because the simplicity of life as a chef that is got amazing powers, little hidden powers that can transform our own working life, comes down to the simplicity of mise en place. So with mise en place, and any restaurateur, has anybody heard the term mise en? Sorry, has anybody not heard the term mise en place? I think you've all heard it.
Perhaps you could give an English translation, perhaps.
Yeah,
for the recording.
Yeah. So mise en place, setting in place. So all of the preparation that goes into, say, for example, taking a average restaurant ahead of dinner service. If the dinner service is, say, 2 hours, the kitchen brigade would have probably done 6 hours of mise en place. So all of the preparation of the ingredients leading up to service. So when it comes to service and the pressure's on and the time is on, everything is there around them within hand's reach to create the plates of goodness and, you know, the magic that is happening on the plate. But it's that state of preparation. So I still carry the principles of mise en place. I have my own to-do list that I still run, that I still have today. It's a simple Word document, but it is called mise en place. So the way I simply prepare for each day is that I prepare my mise en place at the end of the previous day. So yesterday, I did my mise en place for today. And what I mean by that, I wrote the things that I had to do and must do today. And then I've got, it's almost like, I'm happy to share it with anybody if anyone wants to see what it looks like. It's really simple. My mise en place is the lights of traffic lights. So green, what I have to do today. Amber, what I must do this week. And red is what should happen this month. And as I prepare my mise en place the night before, I simply move anything from green and red up into, sorry, from red and amber up into green. So I'm continuously moving my mise en place, but making myself accountable. Because we could, you know, when there's so many things going on around us, it's very easy to lose track. But just by having a simple to-do list, we write down all of the things we want to do, but never get most of them done because there's so many things on there. So I get very, very precise on the things that I really must do today. But the other part of mise en place is working clean. I had a practical exam when I was chef. It was the end of year practical exam, and we had to prepare in the production kitchen at hotel school. There were different workstations all set up with cookers and worktops and all the rest of it. On our own section, we had 3 hours to prepare for a serving of 2 minestrone soup, an individual beef Wellington, an individual creme brulee. And it came, you know, we presented it and the clock was ticking and the bell rang, and then our chief chef came around to each section and tasted. And Chef Newbie came up to my section, tasted the soup. He said, delicious. And he cut into the beef Wellington and it was just perfectly medium rare, which is a real, it's like, whew, that's a relief. And then cracked the teaspoon into the creme brulee and he said, exquisite. And he said, Chef Merrett, for today, I'll give you a 4 out of 10. And goosebumps. I nearly fell through the floor. I was absolutely devastated. He said, Chef Merrett, turn around and look at the state of your section, your station. It is a devastation. It is absolutely horrendous. And there were pots and pans and plates, and it was just a total mess all the way through. So we were taught clean as you go and work in a clean environment. So there's just no mess and rubbish around you. So the 2 elements of mise en place, I still follow it today, and without it, I'd be lost. So it's just a way of really getting a very smart and tidy kind of to-do list system.
Kind of reminded me in the professional speaking world, Peter, that I'm a sort of an old hand at, but you're relatively new. But what a lot of people don't realise is that most professional speakers, for every minute in front of an audience, there's at least an hour in preparation.
Correct.
We call it planned spontaneity. So that, you know, you've worked through your material, that you know it so well that whatever happens in the moment, you're able to respond in a way that's planned, but it's still spontaneous.
I love that point there, Ian. And any of you there who with us today who have to present, you know, do a team presentation or anything at work, quite often, you know, the really bad presentations we sit in is because you can very quickly see that the presenter hasn't given any thought to the opening. It's kind of fumbling, it's awkward, and it's just not really really pleasant at all. And say with your point there, Ian, if I'm delivering a 50-minute keynote, say at a conference, quite often I can spend the whole entire day, I can do 8 hours easily planning my opening 30 seconds. So from when I actually start and go live, my opening 30 seconds, I know the message, the intention of the message, the tone, the pace, the pitch. And you might think, you know, that's what, if you think of first impressions with any kind of presentation you do, is giving that kind of attention.
It's really interesting, isn't it, folks? And there might be some reflection here. I mean, I personally have 76 stories that I use in my workshops and presentations. In a presentation like the one I did for you folks up in Ballarat the other week, I think I told 3 stories, which is about what would be for me in a 30-minute time, there would be 3 stories. The thing is that I don't know which stories until the moment. But because they're rehearsed and because they're known and I know them inside out and they're in my heart, when I feel the one that's right for that audience on that day. But that takes a lot of energy and a lot of effort and a lot of time. And I wonder, as we're talking about, when we bring our hearts, we're talking about seeing and noticing, we're talking about there's always a right moment, there's always a right time, that words matter, that people, you know, feeling appreciated is really what matters. It's a reflection, I think, for all of us, that we as leaders, as heart leaders, if I may say, as wise people, we've got to spend a lot of time and energy being ready for those moments. It's like the principal that wrote the letter to your son, you know, that's something that he's taught himself to do over a period of time. It's right. Something he probably did for a lot of kids, but your son felt it was just for him. And it's like, I remember I did a conference 3 years in a row for a client, and when I got to the third time, I didn't tell a story because I'd told it the previous 2 times, and I kind of felt in the moment as though I should, and then I didn't listen to my heart enough, and I didn't tell the story, and my client was really annoyed with me because I said, well, they've heard it all before, and he said, well, there were 35 people in the room who've never seen you before. And it was kind of a really hard-earned lesson that, you know, even though you know how to do something, there's a time and there's a moment, and you got to be sensitive. And I think we're all experienced people. The question is, are we bringing everything that we are to everything that we do as often as we can? Because I think bringing everything we are to everything we do is at the heart of leadership, and inspiring other people to do the same thing. That's at the heart of leadership.
Any other thoughts?
You go.
Okay, I'm always looking for the how, like how can we, or how can I tell people, or in corporations, I'm not coaching there or something, I just do it also like in more like through writing and want to give talks. So it's not that I'm in a corporation, but when I talked already here to some people and I try to convey my ideas of paying attention and caring in companies, they always like, oh, it sounds great, but how? And how do you really get that to the people? So I got some ideas here now from your stories and this conversation, maybe which just little things which I can include in my collection, which I try to gather the ideas of how I can give people more tools also, not just talking nicely about how great it is if we work and live with more attention, but also giving them some tools. And I got some ideas here. So
brilliant. Brilliant. Thank you. And David, were you going to?
I suppose it's a lot of what we're talking about today can alter culture within an organisation if you get it right with that noticing good as opposed to continually dwelling on what's bad. Like even within that sporting group that I help out that Ian referred to before, it's really clear and obvious to me that expectations are mismatched all the time within a not-for-profit organisation because you don't have that proper conversation and awareness of what role clarity looks like. So as a result of that, people are, I think, continually irritated and upset by each other because they're not happy with things that are occurring, and it's a little bit of a case of noticing what isn't as opposed to what is good. So I think if you can get that culture right in terms of that type of an organisation, which is exactly the same within a major bank, which is where I work, if we're always looking for what's not worked, which is sort of like a natural way of acting really as a human, I think in a lot of ways, because we notice what didn't go well and then we feel uncomfortable about pointing out what was right. But I think done well with any team environment, which I think must happen within teams like Richmond Football Club here in Victoria, where they clearly acknowledge good things and they have fun, and you see them laughing before they go out on into the next quarter. Like they seem to have it right. So and they won the premiership last year, so they're obviously getting the right headspace when they're trying to play. Then it gives them the best opportunity to be the best player they can be as a result.
That's a great point. Thank you. And just hearing the three of you, David, Claudia, and Melissa, one of the things that I realize on reflection now, I learnt in hotels, but it's become even more stronger for me now, is basing everything I do on one single word. And it might sound, too simple to be true, but there's one simple word that I think is misguiding organizations and companies and businesses, which is the continuous fascination with what's next. And it was one of the words that I continuously heard, where every day we were chasing what's next. So every day we were preparing for tomorrow. And we were always thinking, with customer service, with all of the different, the latest things, it's that constant chase for what's next, what's next, what's next. where to the point where that's all where everyone is thinking about, and missing, here comes the single word, is what's now. And it's the foundations that the hotel and hospitality industry is based on. You know, hotel leaders are masterful at planning the future, but they're masters at the moment of now. And what I mean by that is being really in tune with today, with this present moment. And we quite often or quite frequently hear people saying, we need to be more present, and, you know, but often it's just words. The second we step into our full presence from top leadership and everyone in between is when everything changes. But if we're only ever continuously chasing the next piece of software, the next piece of technology, the next app, the next system, the next process, we'll never be in the moment of now. With both feet in the moment of now is when we can create an amazing culture, a great team, brilliant customer service experiences. But it does take a conscious effort. And one of the questions I often ask, particularly when I'm together with a live audience, I often will say something like, when you wake in the morning, do you reach for your iPhone before you reach for the curtains to take a look at the view? And it's something that is so simplistic in itself, but because it's almost where many people are lost, feel we're having to chase what's next. But the second we see the moment now, you know, one of my other great memories of hotels with this in mind, you know, I left my last hotel in 2001, and, you know, 20 years later, I still miss the meetings we had. Yeah. Still miss the meetings. They were just amazing meetings. And the reason they were amazing is because everyone was present. And everyone looked forward to our team meetings. But, you know, Graham Bateman, general manager of my last hotel, real role model for me. He'd be sat at the head of the table, but there was no hierarchy inside the meeting. There was no formal agenda, and there was no awkwardness. So everybody had a voice, everybody was involved, everyone was encouraged to speak up, and wow, they were just breathtaking moments where we were in the moment.
Yeah, Peter, we were having this exact conversation yesterday with my team. You wouldn't believe it. And I said to them, in hotels, you can't take care of today's guests tomorrow.
That's just, yeah, perfect.
That is so profound, Paul. You can't take care of.
It's something unique to hotels, because we used to get frustrated in commercial property that there's this fixation on tomorrow and always planning for the future. And worrying about what's coming next. And I used to say to my clients, well, our job is to take care of your tenants or your guests today, so that you can worry about tomorrow.
One of the great stories in the book is Brad Smith's story of choosing now over normal. And I think one of the fascinating things about now and living in the moment is that a moment is about 90 seconds. So, you know, if I mess up this moment, I've got an opportunity to get it right in the next moment. So it kind of doesn't matter, you know, if you happen to, you know, if you're going for it and it doesn't quite make it or whatever, you can immediately do something about it. That's one of the things that I love about the now. And of course, if you haven't read the book, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, then you should, because that's you know, a great collection of the power of the moment. I'm sure that the principal at the first school, what was it, Mr. Finkel?
Mr. Fagerstrom.
I reckon he'll remember that moment when you gave him that report, that article. I reckon he'll remember that for the rest of his life. That's the power of the moment, isn't it?
Sure is. It sure is. And it's as simple as that. It's as humble as that. And, you know, it's just takes away the continuous chase of tomorrow.
It's one of the reasons why This Is the Moment happens to be my song that I often, Carol and I played in the car. When we look at our Spotify records and we straight away, This Is the Moment's the most played song, because, you know, it says, this is the moment, this is the day when I send all my doubts and demons on their way. That's how it begins. That every endeavor I have made ever is coming into play, is here and now today. This is the moment, this is the time when the momentum and the moment are in rhyme. Give me this moment, this momentous moment. I'll gather up my past and I'll make sense at last. This is the moment when all I've done, all of the dreaming, scheming and screaming become one. This is the day, just see it shine, when all I've lived for becomes mine. This is the moment, this is the hour when I can open tomorrow like a flower, and with my hand to everything that I've planned, fulfill my grand design and see all my stars align, because this is the moment, my final test. Destiny beckoned, I never reckoned second best. I won't look down, I will not fall, because this is the moment, the sweetest moment of them all. This is the moment, forget all the odds. This day or never, I'll sit forever with the gods. And when I look back, I will always recall that moment for moment, this was the greatest moment of them all.
Thank you for sharing that. That's absolutely fabulous. Thank you.
I think you've captured it, Peter. You were always a man for the moment. One of the great reasons that I have fond memories of when we worked together, and now that in what you do for audiences around the world, Jeff, you've seen him up close and personal with the big audiences in the States. It's been a wonderful experience, Peter. We thank you for being here. Simone, some reflections, takeaways, or anyone else before we go?
I love that you've called on me there, Ian. For me, I love that there is often the right moment and the right way. And it's really about putting that energy, that effort, that thought into each moment, because each and every moment does actually have the power to change a person's mindset, to change a person's life, for down a completely different path potentially as well. So that for me is what really rang true. So I'm really thankful for your discussion, Peter, your insight and your heart, bringing your heart to this forum as well.
Thank you, Simone. Truly grateful. Thank you.
So I'm going to stop the record in a moment, but I'll just allow anyone else. Peter, I'm sure you're happy to hang around for a few minutes after the scheduled time if anyone's got other questions or things, but I know we like to finish on time if you do have to go, but any other reflections before I push the button? Well, thank you again, Peter. I think we all know the reason why you're called Mr. Wonderful. So we thank you. We thank you for being with us, and we'll look forward to having you again with us sometime in the future.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ian. Truly grateful indeed. And for everybody for joining us at all of the ridiculous times of the hour around the world with you here.